Yeah, sure. So my kind of positive psychology wellbeing, that's kind of relatively niche, as it were, but my super niche kind of area that I'm super geeky and interested and passionate about is a concept called job crafting. So when I was in a lecture in the University of Melbourne, someone was introducing this concept to me and this concept, and they were saying this is an idea that basically when people will shape their jobs or personalize their jobs in a way that kind of bring out their strengths, align to their interests and what they do, not kind of radically redesigning their jobs, but doing it in small ways, people tend to perform better, they're more engaged, it buffers stress, it supports well-being, and people report higher career satisfaction and growth. And by the way, there's 150 peer-reviewed papers written about job crafting to back this up with evidence. And I'd never heard this. As someone who was kind of interested in this kind of space, it was just something that I'd never heard of or been aware of before. So I immediately, when I heard this in the lecture theatre, I immediately wanted to apply this. So I went out at the University of Melbourne at the time and I designed some workshops saying, right, I'm going to bring this concept to life, see if it works. And we had to, I had to kind of stop. I didn't ask permission to do it. I just went and did this in my lunch hour and said the sessions were titled "How to Make Your Job Better." That was it, or "Happier at Work," or something like that. And I had to stop doing it once we had 200 odd people sign up and refer other people to come to it, because it was getting a bit out of control for me. And I think I mentioned to you, Steve, one of the earlier on, we had a session where I literally had a rocket scientist, like an academic rocket scientist, next to a cleaner, next to an IT technician on the table, talking about how they could apply these kind of concepts. So I was like, people get this. They kind of understand when their work does align to what they do and doesn't align. And so since then, I've been exploring about actually how you can bring this to life with the organization. So actually, how can you apply this? Mm-hmm. And I've also been studying this in the wild. So I'm interested in talking to people who are understanding how people actually job craft in practice. And so that's job crafting.
So if we can give an example, if we could, I think it'll just help cement it. And actually, when we spoke last time, what was quite funny was that we're talking about me in some ways. That like I'm an engineer by trade, so I love solving problems. But I've always been into my tech. I love my cameras. I love my lights. I love talking to people. I love being creative. And it was you that actually said that almost knowingly or not, I'd crafted a business around the stuff that I love. And I think what's quite interesting is that I think you've heard of the phrase ikigai, which is similar. And it was just, if you can almost give an explanation, but what I think people find interesting is to really kind of give an example, and then almost people might think, well, actually, how could I apply it, if that's cool?
Sure. So the first starting point is around starting small. So we're not talking about ripping up your job description or setting fire to your role profile, which might be fun, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about actually how you can make your job maybe 1% better next week. And so I encourage people to think about what's something they can play with or experiment with that takes them maybe 10, 15 minutes a day or an hour a week or something to do things. And what I would encourage you to anyone who's listening is thinking about what are the things that maybe give you energy, or what are the things that you drain your energy. And from the job crafting perspective, what I try to think about is saying, is there a way you can dial down the things that take away energy from you, or dial up the things that you do? So the example that we talked about a little bit, and maybe this relates to, I'll give it a tangible example of a workshop last week. So we just had what I tend to do is run workshops where I encourage people to job craft, then come back a month later to kind of hear how people got on, share stories about successes. And I think those stories are really powerful because I encourage more people to do this. And one person there was working as an HR person, and they were saying one of the things they're interested in, and it reminds me of you in terms of just discussing this, was that they used to have to give updates and meetings around policies and procedures and other things. And they were they've been working from home, being more aware of digital tools. And they were thinking, could I do something different here? So I'm going to record a little video. And so they did this purely because it was something they thought would be fun and interesting. They were kind of interested in tech. Yeah. But the problem they had was around sharing information to their colleagues. So they just recorded a video update, like 2 minutes about a policy change, rather than sending an email and doing it the next agenda. And then they sent it out to their group that they supported. And they found that had a couple of outcomes. Not only did they enjoy that process, learning a new skill effectively in terms of their creativity about video editing and doing things, but the people they serve, the business, people actually listened to it, and they came back and said, that was really fun that you did that kind of video, and I actually listened to it. And to be honest with you, Rob, it wasn't Rob, but it was you know, I don't always listen to I go and tune out when you kind of talk at the meetings. And another kind of consequence of that was that someone in the learning and development team picked up on the fact through a conversation that this person had recorded these videos, and we're like, well, why don't we do that for some of our other training and development? So this person then now has a bigger opportunity to kind of do that type of work in that organization. And it purely started from a small experiment of trying to make kind of their job more interesting. And another tangible example that people can do is around looking at maybe how they run meetings, say. So today we had a session with some people, and we were talking about different styles of meetings, saying they're purposeless and they're very kind of full and other things. And it's like, well, let's go back to basics in terms of first principle. What's the purpose of that meeting? What can you do differently? And we talked about silent meetings, or we talked about maybe having ones where you're making sure that you've got taking it in turns to run the agenda, or doing, just thinking about how you can do existing things in a different way to kind of to make them better, to experiment with things. Often we get, as humans, we're very good at doing things in a very repetitive way. It's comfortable for us. And there's good reason for doing it. But what I want to do for job crafting is saying, are you working in a way that's optimal to you? And if not, how can you make your work better?
I think the video one's a great example, because it's just, people often people enjoy doing stuff, whatever the stuff is. It could be cycling, it could be creative, it could be photography, it could be creative, anything. And you are right. It's those subtle tweaks where you can almost do more of it for your day-to-day job that actually give you a bit more fulfillment and ownership and stuff. And I just think it's a really interesting concept. Have you ever had people almost challenge it to say it'll never work, and you've been able to almost overcome it or prove it?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's really helpful to have that skepticism. In my perspective, skepticism good, because you mean you've engaged with the concept. I'd rather have skepticism than ambivalence. So I'd rather have someone either interested or not. And what I tend to do for that, to counteract that, is two things. One is that people job craft anyway. So when people personalize their jobs, they'll find ways to improve the jobs. And people are just doing it secretly. So most organizations, when you kind of, again, survey people are doing this. They're just doing it in a hidden way. They don't want to talk about it because it kind of suits them, but maybe doesn't suit the business. So it's, from my perspective, from a business perspective, saying, well, why don't we actually do this in plain sight, in a way that works for individuals and the organization? Mm-hmm. The second thing is around actually encouraging people to, when they do it openly, they tend to do it in positive and constructive ways. So it tends to do it in a way that benefits other people. And when you the other way to kind of challenge this is that I often get people to test and experiment for groups. So I often, when I'm with an organization, rather than saying, let's go big bang and do everyone, let's actually just test this. And let's test this find some skeptics, let's find some supporters, and let's find some neutrals. So that could be, I don't know why, but the engineers or the IT team or the legal team tend to be the skeptics. The HR team seem to be the kind of the cheerleaders of the processes generally, and it could be another group that's neutral. And then saying, actually, let's test whether this works for those groups. So rather than going big bang, saying let's collect some evidence. And if you are an organization, if you're a leader that's genuinely interested in performance, you can't ignore the personal side of things. It's like, if you look at the world, we can personalize every aspect of our lives, from our cars to our clothes to our coffee shops to you name it, we can personalize it. And we are deluding ourselves if we don't think there's benefits of bringing that personalization to work. But I think a lot of leaders are just scared of that, because it involves ceding control and trusting their colleagues in a way that maybe they're just not ready for.